Welcome to our deep dive on habits.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at how these kind of invisible forces
Right.
really shape our lives from you know, brushing your teeth to, like making major life choices. We've got research, real life stories, and hopefully,
Yeah.
some aha moments for you today.
Yeah, for sure.
So get ready to learn how understanding habits can actually empower you to
Yeah.
make some positive changes.
It's fascinating how much of our daily lives just run on autopilot, isn't it?
Right.
But these automatic processes, these habits, they aren't just mindless routines.
Yeah.
They really do hold the key to understanding who we are and who we can become.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with
Sure.
the basics.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is a habit?
Yeah.
I mean, we all kind of know what they are,
Right.
but is there like a scientific way to define them?
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
It all starts with the habit loop. Think of it as a 3-part program that's running in the background of your brain.
Yeah.
A cue, a routine, and a reward.
Okay, so the cue is what triggers the habit.
Yep.
The routine is the action itself.
Exactly.
And the reward is what reinforces the habit
Yes.
and makes us want to do it again.
Exactly. A great way to illustrate this is with the story of Eugene Pauly.
Okay.
He was a man who sadly suffered severe brain damage
Okay.
from viral encephalitis.
Wow.
Now, you'd think that this would make forming new habits impossible.
Well, you would think.
Right.
Your brain's damaged.
But Eugene's case was remarkable.
Okay.
She lost his memory, but he could still learn new habits. Researchers studying him discovered that habits actually reside in a different part of the brain
Wow.
than conscious memory.
Wait, so even if you lose your memory,
Right.
you can still learn new habits?
Absolutely.
That's wild.
It really is, yeah.
Does that mean habits are kind of like subconscious programs running in our brains?
That's a great way to think about it, yeah. This area of the brain, the basal ganglia, is ancient. Even reptiles have it. So it's like our brain's autopilot,
Okay.
helping us conserve mental energy
Yeah.
by turning frequently performed actions into these automatic routines. Think about when you first learned to drive a car.
Yeah.
At first, it took so much concentration.
So much focus.
But now you can practically do it without thinking.
Without thinking.
That's your basal ganglia.
Wow.
Turning that complex skill into a habit.
Habits are kind of like mental shortcuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
That free up our conscious minds to focus on other things.
Yeah.
But if they're running on autopilot, how do we actually change them?
Yeah.
It feels like we're fighting against our own brains.
Yeah. It can definitely feel that way, especially
Yeah.
when we're dealing with habits that we know aren't good for us.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We can hack the habit loop
Okay.
for our advantage.
Right.
One of the most important things to understand is the role of cravings.
Cravings. Like that irresistible urge to eat a whole bag of chicks.
Yeah.
Even though I know I'll regret it later.
Exactly. Cravings are the engine
Okay.
that drives the habit loop. They create a really powerful sense of anticipation and reward that makes us want to repeat the behavior.
Okay.
A fascinating example of this is the story of Claude C. Hopkins,
Okay.
the ad man who created the Pepsodent craze
Okay.
back in the early 1900s.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him. Didn't he
Yeah.
convince people to brush their teeth
He did.
by playing on their insecurities
Yeah.
about tooth film?
Exactly, yeah. Back then, hardly anyone brushed their teeth.
Right.
Hopkins saw an opportunity. The cue was the tooth film,
Yeah.
and the reward was the promise of beautiful white teeth.
Yeah.
But he needed to create a craving,
I know.
a desire that would drive people to buy Pepsodent.
Yeah.
And he found it in that tingling sensation that the toothpaste created.
So he wasn't just selling toothpaste.
Right.
He was selling like the feeling of a clean, fresh mouth.
Exactly.
Wow.
He linked a basic desire to feel clean with a specific product. That's the genius of marketing
Wow.
and the power of understanding how cravings work.
That makes me think about all the ways that companies are trying to create cravings in us today, right?
Yeah.
Are we just constantly being manipulated by these marketing tricks?
Yeah.
Without even realizing it?
It's definitely something to be aware of.
Right.
But understanding the science of habit formation can help us become more conscious consumers.
Okay.
We can start to recognize those cues and rewards that companies are using to trigger our cravings and make more intentional choices about the products we buy and the habits we form.
Okay, so we've got the habit loop, we've got the cues, we've got the routine.
Right.
We've got this powerful engine of cravings.
Yes.
But how do we actually change a habit?
Yeah.
It still feels a bit like an uphill battle.
It can be,
Right.
but it's definitely possible. And luckily, researchers have discovered some incredibly effective strategies.
Okay.
One of the most powerful is called the golden rule of habit change.
Ooh. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
Lay it on me. What's the golden rule?
The golden rule is surprisingly simple. Keep the same cue and reward, but change the routine.
Wait, so you're saying I don't have to eliminate the cue or the reward?
You got it.
That sounds almost too easy.
It might sound that way,
Right.
but it's incredibly effective.
Okay.
The key is to find a new routine that satisfies that same craving as the old habit.
Okay.
Right.
Do you have an example of how this works in real life?
Absolutely. Think about Tony Dungy,
Okay.
the football coach, who famously transformed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers into champions.
Yeah.
He did it by focusing on changing the team's habits.
Okay.
Particularly on defense.
So instead of trying to overhaul their entire defensive strategy, he focused on changing like their habits.
Exactly.
Their automatic responses on the field.
Precisely. Instead of reacting to whatever the opposing offense did, Dungy trained his players to focus on one specific cue, like the quarterback's wrist.
Oh, wow.
This allowed them to react more quickly and decisively without overthinking.
So the cue is still the same.
Right.
The opposing team's offensive play, the reward was still the same.
Yes.
Making a successful defensive play.
Yep.
But the routine,
Right.
the way they reacted was totally different.
Totally different.
And it worked.
It worked.
They became one of the toughest defenses in the league.
Absolutely. He understood that trying to eliminate a habit entirely is extremely difficult. Yeah. Instead, he used the golden rule to redirect their existing habits toward a more effective outcome.
That's amazing. It shows that even these deeply ingrained habits can be changed.
Right.
If we just understand how they work.
You've got it.
But there's another piece to this puzzle. Right. You mentioned belief earlier.
Right.
How does that play into changing habits?
You're absolutely right. Belief is crucial for habit change. In fact, it might be the most important ingredient of all.
Oh, really?
Tony Dungy knew this too.
Yeah.
He didn't just teach his players new routines.
Right.
He instilled a belief in them, a confidence that they could win.
Yeah.
He focused on small victories, building momentum, and fostering a sense of shared purpose.
So it's not enough to just know the golden rule.
Yeah.
We also have to believe that we can actually apply it.
Absolutely.
It's like anything else in life.
Right.
If you don't believe in yourself.
If you don't believe that change is possible, you're far less likely to put in the effort required to make it happen.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've got the habit loop, the power of cravings, the golden rule of habit change.
Yeah.
But you mentioned something earlier about keystone habits.
Yes.
What are those?
Yeah.
And how do they fit into the picture?
Keystone habits are like the VIPs of the habit world.
Okay.
They have a ripple effect. Right. They can influence other habits and even transform entire organizations. Right. One of the most powerful examples of this is the story of Paul O'Neill, the former CEO of Alcoa.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about Paul O'Neill.
Yeah.
And these so-called keystone habits.
When O'Neill took over Alcoa, it was a struggling company. People expected him to focus on profits, but he surprised everyone by announcing that his top priority was worker safety.
Worker safety. Yeah. That's an interesting choice for a CEO.
It is.
Trying to turn around a company.
Yeah.
What was he thinking?
O'Neill was a visionary.
Okay.
He understood the power of keystone habits.
Yeah.
He knew that focusing on worker safety would force the company to change its entire culture, create a ripple effect, and lead to improvements in other areas.
So it wasn't just about safety. It was about using safety as a lever.
Absolutely.
To transform the whole organization.
And that's precisely what happened.
Okay.
By prioritizing worker safety. O'Neill created a chain reaction of positive changes.
Okay.
Alcoa had to improve communication between departments, invest in better training, and streamline its manufacturing processes.
And did this focus on safety actually improve the company's bottom line?
It did.
Wow.
Not only did Alcoa become one of the safest companies in the world, but its profits also soared.
Really?
O'Neill's keystone habit had a domino effect,
Right.
leading to improvements.
In productivity,
Right.
quality control, and employee morale.
That's incredible. It's like he found a magic button that triggered a cascade of...
In a sense, he did.
Wow.
He identified a keystone habit, worker safety,
Yeah.
and he focused on making it
Yeah.
a core value of the company.
So how do we apply this concept of keystone habits to our own lives?
We all have certain keystone habits that can have a disproportionate impact on our well-being and our success. It might be something like exercising regularly, meditating daily, or making time for personal reflection each week.
Right.
The key is to identify the habits that have the biggest leverage in your life.
Right.
And focus on making those rock solid.
So it's not about trying to change everything at once.
Right.
It's about identifying those habits.
Exactly.
It'll have the biggest impact and then focusing on those first. It's like finding the pressure points that unlock a whole new level of positive change in your life.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about individual habits. But you mentioned earlier that habits play a role in social change too, right?
You do, yeah.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Absolutely. Think about the Montgomery bus boycott.
Okay.
Sparked by Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat on a segregated bus.
Yeah.
While her individual act of courage was crucial, the boycott's success wasn't just about her.
Okay.
It was about the power of social networks and this collective habit change.
So individual habits can create a ripple effect.
Yeah.
But social habits can create like a tidal wave.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow.
Think about the role of churches and community groups in spreading the word about the boycott and mobilizing people to participate.
Yeah.
These social networks were essential for turning an individual act of defiance into this powerful collective movement.
This brings up another interesting point.
Right.
If our habits are so deeply ingrained and influenced by these social networks, do we really have free will?
Yeah.
Are we just puppets of our habits and our social conditioning?
That's a question philosophers have been grappling with for centuries.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt that habits and social influences have a profound impact on our choices and behaviors.
So how do we reconcile this idea of free will with the fact that our habits can feel so automatic and even controlling at times?
To explore that, let's delve into some stories that highlight this complex interplay between habit, free will, and responsibility.
Okay.
We'll start with the thought-provoking case of Angie Bachman, a woman who became addicted to gambling.
Okay, this is where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's dive into Angie's story and see what it reveals about the power of habit and the limits of free will.
Absolutely. Angie's story is really powerful.
Yeah.
It illustrates how habits, especially those tied to addiction, can just completely hijack our decision-making abilities.
Yeah.
She knew she was losing control, racking up huge debts.
Right.
But the allure of the casino,
Yeah.
that anticipation of a big win, kept pulling her back in.
It sounds like the craving, that anticipation of the reward became so strong.
It did, yeah.
That it just like overwhelmed irrational thinking.
Yeah.
It's a bit frightening to think how powerful
it is.
Those urges can be.
It really is. And it highlights a key point about how habits actually work on a neurological level.
Okay.
When we engage in a habit, our brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward.
Right.
Over time, the brain starts to crave that dopamine hit, making it harder and harder to resist the habit.
So in Angie's case, the act of gambling itself,
Yeah.
the anticipation of winning,
Right.
triggered that dopamine rush.
It did.
That kept her coming back for more.
Exactly.
Even though the logical part of her brain knew it was destructive.
Exactly. It's like a feedback loop.
Right.
The habit triggers the dopamine.
Right.
The dopamine reinforces the habit.
Yeah.
And the cycle continues, even when the consequences are negative.
Yeah.
But this doesn't mean we're completely powerless.
Okay.
Angie's story also illustrates the power of awareness
Okay.
and intervention.
You're saying that even when habits feel incredibly strong, we can still break free from their grip.
Absolutely. The first step is recognizing that you have a problem, that a habit is no longer serving you. For Angie, this realization came when she hit rock bottom, facing financial ruin and strained relationships. That's when she decided to seek help.
Yeah.
And start the difficult process of changing her habits.
It takes a lot of courage to admit that you need